Adolf Hitler was born in Braunau am Inn, a small Austro-Hungarian village just on the border with Germany, and quite ironically he was born in one of the most democratic countries in Europe, in the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. And after the fall of Austro-Hungary, the dominant thesis in European historiography suddenly became that this large empire was kind of doomed from the start in this new era of nationalism. Most historians began to claim that such a multi-ethnic empire with such a very democratic political system simply had to fail. And we can describe Hitler's take on Austro-Hungary as being in line with such conclusions. But was Austro-Hungary truly destined to fail? And while answering this question, I am also going to explain how Hitler began to despise democracy, because according to him, he did not always hate democracy. So was Austro-Hungary just a paper tiger, a country that was doing well on paper when you look at its size and at its economic prosperity, or was it actually doomed to fail? Well, if we say that it was doomed and that it had to fail, we simply have to notice that there are some very weird indicators that, for example, are not present in empires that usually fell throughout history. For example, in the Soviet Union, there was economic stagnation and then even degrowth before it fell. The same can be said about the Ottoman Empire, and they also experienced losses on the battlefield and generally violence on their soil, while Austro-Hungary was generally a peaceful country with some exceptions. For example, in Hungary, the industrial growth between 1910 and 1913 was 44%. Industrial exports grew for 44%. Then the death rate of newborn children was also becoming lower and lower. And finally, the percentage of children in elementary school in Austro-Hungary was higher in Germany, and its economic growth was actually the highest in Europe. But again, I'm not saying that it was a very stable country, that problems did not exist between all these weird nations and their political parties. But what also needs to be said is that Austro-Hungary was also replaced by states that were, I would argue, even more unstable. For example, the Kingdom of Yugoslavia is seen by most historians as the most unstable country that existed in Europe between two wars, and even Czechoslovakia wasn't that stable. But yes, of course, the Bosnian Serbs did feel oppressed, and they did want to unify with Serbia because they were still ruled by a Muslim feudal caste, which is why Gavrilo Princip ended up killing Franz Ferdinand in the end. But purely from an economic perspective, Bosnia was actually doing quite well. And when you look at GDP per capita, it was in a better situation than Serbia. And the same can be said about a lot of other smaller Slavic nations that found themselves in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. For example, for Croatia, the period of Austro-Hungarian rule was a period of great cultural elevation. The cathedral in Zagreb was built. The first theater of Zagreb was also built under the Austro-Hungarian rule that was sometimes very oppressive when it came to political freedoms, but it was definitely the best thing that happened from a cultural and economic growth perspective. For example, the city of Pula became the place where the Emperor of Austro-Hungary kept his royal navy, and that led to great economic prosperity for Croatia, and it was also a great honor. And all in all, life on the streets of Austro-Hungary was peaceful. While there were political arguments all the time, generally speaking, life was peaceful, and the trains ran on time. in that sense, life was very good in Austro-Hungary. And Ban Jelačić, for example, a national hero for Croatian people, is an example of a political figure that realized that the Habsburg Empire is a great shield from Hungarian nationalism, and many other smaller nations liked Austro-Hungary because they realized that without the protection of a bigger state, they would fall prey to other smaller imperialisms. For example, the Ukrainians were scared of Polish imperialism, and Serbs were scared of finding themselves, for example, in a Croatian majority state, and vice versa was also true. So while maybe nobody was perfectly satisfied with Austro-Hungary, most reasonable people realized that it was the best deal that they could have at the time. And what's funny is that the Franz Joseph the First of Austria had this funny phrase that he kept repeating all the time after he visited a political event as a guest, and he was constantly being invited by all the nations, by the Czechs, by the Croatians, by the Hungarians. And when he was asked about the event, he would always reply, "It was nice, we liked it." And the genius of constantly utilizing the same statement is the fact that you pretty much did not say anything and you treated everybody equally. And that is why many Croatians and Slovenians and even Serbs that loved the monarchy were willing to die in order to avenge Franz Ferdinand. And also many in Croatia hoped that Franz Ferdinand will give them, once he inherits the throne, their own unit inside Austro-Hungary. And even Franz Ferdinand spoke of creating a union of many smaller states, which would be then something like a monarchistical version of the European Union. But now we have reached the crucial point in this video, and I want to explain to you how democracy in Austro-Hungary functioned and why Hitler lost faith in democracy, according to his own words. So the Imperial Council was the most democratic institution in Europe at the time. Why do I say that? Because the common folks were invited to actually just watch the parliamentary discussions in the Imperial Council, and many in the Imperial Council utilized the filibuster technique. They would just speak as long as they could, and then their opposition could not pass certain bills that they wanted to pass. And Czechs were actually Czechs became famous for using this filibuster technique. They would simply read dictionaries or talk about recipes in parliament in order to lose time. And young Hitler was one of those that decided to watch this Imperial Council, this new form of democracy that recently became democracy for all men, even the poor ones in the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. And Hitler said that watching the Imperial Council cured him of his infantile illusions about democracy as a good system. So yeah, Hitler even at that time was racist, and he saw democracy as a decadent system that gave a lot of rights to even smaller nations within Austro-Hungary, and he disliked this idea of filibuster. The concept of filibuster convinced him that democracy is just inefficient and that it just loses time. You cannot pass anything. But let us, for example, look at the global perspective. Was Austro-Hungary a stable country, let's say, compared to France or Germany? Well, no. But if we zoom out for a minute, Teddy Roosevelt, for example, said that the American rule over the Philippines has a lot to learn from how the Austro-Hungarian elites rule over the Slavic population. So when you look at the world as a whole, Austro-Hungary was actually a stable state compared to many other colonial empires that existed at the time. And yeah, primarily I wanted to explain to you why Hitler lost faith in democracy, but what is also interesting is how a famous Hungarian nationalist describes the experience that the Hungarian people had with the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, and I believe that many other nations had the same experience. In his youth, he hated the Austro-Hungarian monarchy because he was a Hungarian nationalist, Oscar Jaja, that is. And later, after he lived through the horrors of fascism and then totalitarian communism, after he saw what his country was forced to go through, the country of Hungary, he said that actually Austro-Hungary was one of the best periods for the Hungarian people. And I kind of cannot blame him, because when you look at the amount of individual freedom that existed in Austro-Hungary, it was much larger than what existed in communism and in fascism. And compared to Hitler and Stalin, this old man with a funny mustache that just used to say, "It was nice, we liked it," does not seem like such a bad person. Okay, don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you liked this video.